this one on? Oh, so much better. They told me I could have my microphone. It's like my security blanket. So I'm happy about that. If you want to open up to your notes, session 3. Now I know, we got through session 2, which is a little bit hot mic. We got through session 2, which is a little bit, outside the Bible, but just trying to give a little bit of context. And then this session will be a necessary session. Most people are just like, why? But if you don't cover cosmology, you can't get to first century Judaism for a lot of reasons. And cosmology, when I say cosmology, the view of the cosmos, how the universe is structured. And so ancient Jews, like I said this morning, are different than modern Westerners. And not so much different in like cultural stuff, which there is that, but they're different in how they view the universe, the structure of the universe, and how they view time. And a lot of that change happened in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th centuries as kind of Greek philosophy and view of the universe began to become the dominant ideological influence on people who believe that Jesus is the Messiah and what that meant, etc. So we're going to do a little bit of study of Genesis 1:1 this afternoon. Hopefully we've all had coffee. And if you nod off, I don't take it personally. That's on me, not on you. So, wait, is that the cold one? Okay. So 2 Peter 3 at the top of session 3, but according to his promise, we're waiting for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. Therefore, beloved, since you're waiting for these, be diligent to be found in him without spot or blemish and at peace. So, how you view, a little bit tomorrow, mainly Sunday morning we're not going to be here though, are we? Sunday. Is it here? Sunday morning? Okay. So Sunday morning, I'll kind of talk a little bit about how eschatology drives discipleship. And it's within the modern Western church, eschatology and discipleship a lot of times are put at odds. And if you focus on eschatology, then discipleship becomes warped. And it's exactly the opposite. It's discipleship in the scriptures drives, or eschatology, your view of the end, of what eternal life is, of the future hope, is what drives discipleship in the scriptures. And bad discipleship is actually driven by bad eschatology. And particularly in the West and America, eschatology just simply becomes assumed as things like the American dream, I would say, would be the eschatology of a large swath of the American church, and that's what drives, that's the end game, that's what drives the discipleship in the Western church. And so it's eschatology that really has the discipleship implications. And you see it here in 2 Peter 3, where it's the hope of the new heavens and new earth, and the things associated with that, the day of God, the resurrection of the dead, the age to come, that is what produces the urgency of diligence, of sobriety, of taking sin seriously, repenting of it, fleeing the wrath to come, walking uprightly in purity and holiness before the Lord, and remaining faithful to the end being the day of the Lord, the coming of the Messiah, the resurrection, and the age to come. Now, why it's important is because biblical eschatology is a restoration of biblical protology. So what you view in the beginning determines what you view in the end. So the new heavens and new earth and the resurrection of the dead are viewed as a restoration or a recreation of the original design. So it helps to kind of go through a little bit of discussion on what the heavens and the earth are in the scriptures. We won't do too much in like Second Temple Judaism, so particularly Second Enoch and Third Baruch are heavenly travel books. So Enoch and Baruch are taken up through the heavens, and it describes, like Second Enoch, the first 20 chapters is just a detailed, like as he's traveling through the various heavens, what he sees, what he encounters. We won't look at those passages, but we'll do more of just kind of a biblical survey that produced that understanding in Second Temple Judaism and is the background for the New Testament. And so if we get a little bit of context for what the heavens, plural, and the earth were to first century Jew, then we can see how they view the future new heavens and new earth. And that informs our discipleship, what we're heading toward. So the first point, the heavens and the earth, what are the heavens? And that is kind of the basic idea. This is in contrast to kind of the Western tradition, the Greek tradition, in which the universe is split in two. The universe is two parts, material and immaterial, or later understood as naturalis et supernaturalis, the natural and supernatural. And that's not how the Bible or the Jews ever understood the universe as far as being split in two. So they view the universe based on creation. And Genesis 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens, the Hebrew Shemayim, and the earth. And the earth was without form and void. Darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters, Mayim. So there's a relationship between the waters and the heavens, the Mayim and the Shemayim. And God said, let there be an expanse, the Hebrew being rakia, in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse, the rakia, from the waters that were above the expanse, and it was so. And then the key verse, which helps us not wander around in darkness, is verse 8. God called the rakia Shemayim. God called the expanse the heavens. So we know that the discussion about these three words, the Mayim, the Shemayim, and the rakia, are cosmic in nature. They're not local just to the earth, but they're cosmic in nature. And there is an equation between the rakia and the Shemayim. They're the same reality. And the rakia is used twice, only twice in the Hebrew Bible, elsewhere in Psalm 19 verse 1 and 150 verse 1. And both times it's used in parallelism to the heavens. So there's consistency that the rakia and the heavens, plural, are similar. They're equated. And the heavens throughout the Hebrew Bible is always in the plural, always in the plural. In the New Testament, it's about half-half, but it's as far as the heavens being singular versus plural. We'll get there as far as why you have it in the singular sometimes versus plural other times. And then in a number of verses, it's used in tandem, singular and plural together, which is particularly interesting. So the heavens are an expanse of some kind that are plural in nature. The second point B is that the heavens are stretched. It's a stretched expanse. And so you have 8 times in the Tanakh in which God describes stretching out the heavens. So the heavens are understood as some kind of reality that is expanded in some way. You get that, for example, in Isaiah 40, in which the kind of prophetic commentary on Genesis 1. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Been told from the beginning? Have you not understood? Since the earth was founded. So you have kind of a direct commentary on Genesis 1. He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth, its people like grasshoppers. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy, spreads them out like a tent to live in. He brings princes to naught, reduces rulers of the world to nothing. Zechariah 12, thus declares the Lord, who stretched out the heavens and founded the earth. So an essential characteristic of the heavens is that they're stretched out and that they are equated as an expanse, a rakia. And then third, they're the abode of existence. So birds exist in the heavens. They fly across the heavens, across the face of the heavens, and live in the heavens, along with clouds, rain, and thunder, sun, moon, stars, idols, spirits, and powers, and God himself. So the heavens are the abode of various aspects of creation. And then along with that, you get the heavens are described as, in light of that, as concrete and sensible. Like they are things that are seen, heard, touched, etc., like Isaiah 6, where Isaiah is taken up and he sees things, he hears things. The angel comes with the coal and touches his lips. And then the fourth aspect is that they're delineated plural, and where the abode of God in the heavens is the heaven of heavens. So, or some translations will say the height of the heavens. Like Deuteronomy 10, behold, to the Lord your God belong heaven. And in the Hebrew Bible, you get an arbitrariness of translations. So some of your translations will say, if you open up, it'll say, to your God belong the heavens, plural. But this one, ESV, has heaven, singular. And throughout the Old Testament, you'll get different translations will translate either plural or singular arbitrarily. But it's always plural, at least in the Old Testament. So belong the heavens and the heaven of heavens, or other translations will say the height or the highest heavens, the earth and all that's in it. Yet the Lord set his heart and love on your fathers, chose their offspring after them, your people. So the redemptive narrative and the relationship, the covenant with Israel, is developed within this view of the cosmos, the heavens and the earth, and God's function within that. And so I think of it as the players and the game is developed on this playing field, the heavens and the earth. And if you change the playing field, then you start to affect the rules of the game and the engagement in the game. So if you take a soccer team and you put a soccer team on a basketball court and you tell them to play and score, you're going to end up, because the basketball court is associated with different rules and different players, and you end up playing funny. But if you ask what's the importance of the playing field to soccer or basketball, it's relatively unimportant. It's just the playing field, right? But if you get the playing field wrong, it becomes important. So this is part of the dynamic that the cosmos, the cosmology of the Bible is relatively important until you change the cosmology and you split the universe in two, material and immaterial, and then all of a sudden funny things start happening with God and human beings and angels and demons and how everything interacts and functions together. So 2 Corinthians 12, when Paul talks about himself and his heavenly journey 14 years ago, being caught up to the third heaven, whether in the body or out, I don't know. this wouldn't be abnormal, particularly in light of Second Baruch Second Enoch and Third Baruch, which have this exact kind of language, particularly the third heaven. So most Jews viewed the heavens as seven heavens, plural. Second Baruch has 10, but most of them, Second Enoch has 10. Third Baruch has 7. But it's some plurality, right? Whether it's 3 or 7 or 10, however many there are, there's more than one. And they're continuous, they're viewed as connected and together, and they're dynamic. So things happen in the heavens that are dynamically related to the earth. You think of 1 Kings, I think 22, with the divine council that happens, and there's a gathering over King Ahab. What are we going to do about his idolatry? And the spirits come forward one after another, and then another one comes and says, I'll be a lying spirit in the mouths of the prophets, etc. So there's a dynamic relationship between the height of the heavens, where God is dwelling, over the heavens and on the earth underneath. Rather than in the Greek universe, there's material and immaterial, and there's basically no dynamic relationship between those two worlds. Once you go from material to immaterial, there's no going back and forth. It's static, it stays the same, etc. So anyway, okay, so flip over to page 2. This is just kind of a picture on page 2 of, I kind of got this idea from Russell Humphreys, Starlight in Time. He's a creationist, but as far as interpreting Genesis 1, verses 6 through 8, interpreting that as cosmological, meaning it speaks of the cosmos as a whole rather than a localized creation of the earth. And so on day 1, the Spirit is hovering over the waters, creates light first within the darkness of the waters, and then that light, an expanse is created for light to function within the rakia on day 2, and then that expanse is stretched and called the heavens in the next picture, and then day 3 is when you have the earth spread out and the vegetation on the earth. The next aspect of kind of biblical cosmology is that at the height of the heavens, God rules enthroned at the height of the heavens, within the heavens. So God functions within creation. That doesn't limit, doesn't mean that he's not transcendent. The same way we dwell in houses, and that doesn't make our house greater than us. We transcend our houses. But the heavens are viewed as the abode of God and the angels, and that God dwells in the height of the heavens. And he sits on a literal throne at the height of the heavens. So Psalm 103:19, the Lord has established his throne in the heavens. Some translations will say heaven, singular, arbitrary. Psalm 2, the kings of the earth take their stand. Verse 4, the one enthroned in heaven, or other translations will say enthroned in the heavens, laughs, the Lord ridicules them. And that throne is a literal throne at the height of the heavens within a heavenly temple. And so the heavenly temple theme is very common in Second Temple literature, because it's picked up from the Tanakh, particularly the Sinaitic tradition of the tabernacle, in which Moses was taken up on the mountain, and they ate with God on the mountain, and Moses was on the mountain for 40 days. And so the Jewish tradition is, when God tells him after that, make a tabernacle in the pattern that I have shown you. It's not just the words that follow. The Jewish tradition associates that pattern with what he saw on the mountain. And as he went up the mountain, he was shown the heavenly tabernacle, and that the earthly tabernacle was created in the image of that heavenly temple. Does that make sense? So the Lord, verse Psalm 11, for example, the Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in the heavens. Some translations, his eyes see, his eyelids test the children of men. Micah 1, hear you peoples, all of you, listen, earth and all who live in it, that the sovereign Lord may bear witness against you, the Lord from his holy temple. Look, the Lord is coming down from his dwelling place. He comes down and treads on the heights of the earth. So the Lord sits enthroned at the height of the heavens and often comes down through the heavens to the earth to see, like at Tower of Babel, or to visit Abraham and the angel of the Lord, kind of theophanic revelations, or like in the prophetic tradition like this, and Isaiah 64:1. Bow the heavens and come down, make your enemies a burning pot, etc. So the Lord is pictured as coming down out of his heavenly sanctuary or temple, where he sits enthroned over creation. So page 3, this gives a little context for Hebrews 8, right, in which you have a theologizing in Hebrews 7, 8, 9, and 10 on Psalm 110. And Psalm 110, like we talked about this morning, is very straightforward as far as God, the Messiah at his right hand, the extending of the rod from Zion to crush his enemies on the day of his wrath, heap up the kings of the earth. And then you have that weird verse 4, I will make you a priest in the order of Melchizedek. And so Hebrews 7 through 10 is kind of an early Jewish midrash, by far the most native Jewish book in the New Testament. It's kind of an early Jewish midrash on Psalm 110, verse 4. There you are. And, man, you guys are quick. And so Hebrews 8 is kind of a description of the Messiah's priestly function. Within that native Jewish apocalyptic worldview and narrative, the Messiah's priestly function based on how Jews viewed the cosmos and the role of the priest at the time. And so it says, now the main point is what has been said is this: we have such a high priest who has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne in the majesty in the heavens. So that's Psalm 110, right? A minister in the sanctuary, in the true tabernacle, which the Lord pitched, not man, which is the heavenly tabernacle. For every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices. Those who offer the gifts, according to the law, who serve a copy and a shadow of the heavenly things, just as Moses was warned by God when he was about to erect the temple, build it according to the pattern I've shown you. So this is kind of, on your notes, this little diagram is kind of how they viewed Genesis 1, right? And the original creation and cosmology of the universe. A plurality of the heavens, 3, 5, 7, or 10, however many, but some kind of plurality of the heavens, with God ruling at the height of the heavens in a heavenly temple on a heavenly throne over creation, delegating dominion and authority to humanity in an earthly paradise sanctuary. And so in Jewish literature, Adam and Eve are viewed as the original priests, and the Garden of Eden was the original sanctuary that then the later Jewish tabernacle is patterned on the kind of the Edenic tabernacle. And because Adam and Eve are commanded to work and keep the garden, which is the same two verbs that the priests are commanded in Leviticus and following. So in this context, you have the powers in the heavens, in which in the heavens you have powers and principalities. So there's kind of a governmental structure from the height of the heavens, and some of those powers have become corrupt. And so that's where you get demons and spirits involved within that cosmology. So Isaiah 24, in that day, the Lord will punish the powers in the heavens above and the kings on the earth below. And so Jews viewed the powers in the heavens as related to the table of nations in Genesis 11, and the Lord ordaining the 70 nations, and demons and angels had various assignments or were restricted according to that table of nations. And then you have conflict in the heavens between those two. But ultimately, the day of the Lord, the new heavens and new earth, is a purging of the present heavens and present earth, creating a home of righteousness. And as in Isaiah 24, they'll be herded together like prisoners bound in a dungeon. They'll be shut up in prison and be punished after many days. The moon will be dismayed, the sun ashamed, for the Lord Almighty will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem before its elders with great glory. So Jerusalem becomes the center because of the covenant and the relationship with the Jewish people. Jerusalem is the center of that cosmic renewal at the day of God, the cleansing of the heavens and the earth. Now, this is a little bit in contrast to modern reconstructions of the biblical or ancient worldview. And most of the modern reconstructions are based on historical scholarship, particularly coming out of Germany in the late 19th century and early 20th century. And so George Robinson seems to be the first guy to pictorialize these ideas, and he taught at the University of Chicago and McCormick Seminary there at the turn of the century, and he seems to be the first guy to take kind of this critical scholarship and make a picture of it, and that has really caught hold for the last 100 plus years. And so you'll see some version of this picture in a lot of study Bibles and a lot of introductions to the Old Testament and that kind of deal. And I'm critical of this reconstruction because it, number one, as Noel Weeks, he, I don't know, whatever, this presentation or this picture is not actually found anywhere in the ancient Near East. And that was the kind of critical historical scholarship at that time, around 1900, argued that the Middle East had a universal cosmology and narrative that then the Israelites just picked up. And the reality is, if you read ancient Near Eastern texts, the Anet, by James Pritchard, which kind of catalogs all of the Mesopotamian creation myths and Egyptian and Hittite, and this isn't anywhere in any of those. Like, the cosmology is not the same, the narrative is not the same, but this picture, this is why I make diagrams, because pictures kind of burn themselves on people's minds. And so this particular picture, which views the rakia as a metal dome over the earth, and the earth is flat, and then you have waters outside of the metal dome, and the sun, moon, and stars kind of float across the metal dome like lily pads. And then God functions in the heaven of heavens outside the waters, outside of the heavens. Number one, it's never spoken like this. Number two, the Bible doesn't ever declare a flat earth or a metal dome. You can take that. There are, the language can be viewed like that, and no doubt ancient cultures have viewed it like that, but I think the better approach, there's a fairly well-known creationist scholar, James Holding, who's written a number of articles on equivocal language. And so if you're God and you're going to speak to a culture that is applicable across time and history, You're not going to speak something that holds true 3,000 years later to people 3,000 years earlier. You're going to use the simplest form of language that communicates truth equivocally across time and history. And so people 3,000 years ago can take it one way, and 3,000 years ago it can be taken a different way. So that's kind of how I would view it. And this particular reconstruction is unfaithful to the scriptures in three ways. And so, number one, it does not equate the rakia with the heavens. Okay, so that's the first major problem, is that in this reconstruction of ancient cosmology, the rakia is fundamentally different than the heavens. But in all three instances, in Genesis 1, Psalm 19, Psalm 150, the rakia and the heavens are equated as in Hebrew parallelism. So in light of that, the rakia cannot be the abode of birds, powers, principalities, sun, moon, stars, clouds, rain, thunder, and God himself, right? So you end up denying it's a foreign kind of imposition to say that the rakia is a solid dome structure. And then third, saying that the rakia is a solid dome structure separates the heavens from the heaven of heavens. And in the scriptures, every time in that list on page 1 with the heavens of the heavens, if you work through all those passages, there's never any separation between the heavens and the heaven of heavens. They're always continuous. So that would be my criticism of this modern critical reconstruction of biblical cosmology. And I just put a quote in here from R. Laird Harris, who was he was a Reformed scholar, very conservative, taught at Knox and Covenant Theological Seminary. And he's really probably the primary reason that some translations use expanse instead of firmament. He was one of the main guys to make that transition away from firmament, which comes from the Latin firmamentum, which has a solid dome association attached to it, where expanse is a better kind of representation of what the rakia and the heavens involve. So, point 3, the development of Western cosmology. I guess I'll read that Harris quote. It's good. Is it modern Bible students who have travestied the biblical picture, paralleled it to Babylonian nonsense, then informed a secular public that the Bible is not believable by a modern mind? He's talking specifically about Rudolf Bultmann here. Destructive criticism has sold the world a shabby substitute for the biblical cosmology. We need to re-emphasize the biblical teaching. The foolish notions of a 3-storied universe or a flat square earth or a geocentric universe are not biblical, and we need to say so as loudly as possible. Now, I don't think the Bible gives a scientific explanation of the universe, but it uses equivocal language to communicate the redemptive narrative. And that doesn't mean that the scientific realities aren't important. So that's also a common theme in modern academia, is to say that the scriptures just communicate a redemptive narrative that doesn't have scientific implications. And I would say that's not the case either. Okay, so on to point 2, I covered the heavens and the earth so that I can get to the contrasting point of the Western tradition of cosmology and how Western Gentiles have structured the universe has been largely dependent on the development of Greek or Hellenistic cosmology. And Plato being the bellwether or exemplifying that tradition. This is a quote by Whitehead, I think. Was that his? Yeah, Whitehead, who was a philosophy professor, secular, but he says, the safest generalization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. I do not mean the systematic scheme of thought which scholars have undoubtedly extracted from his writings, but I allude to the wealth of general ideas scattered through them. And so Western tradition is a long history of footnotes or a development of ideas out of the academy in Athens and Plato's ideas and his disciples, particularly Aristotle and the three guys that Aristotle discipled, which was Alexander the Great being the most notable, and his zeal to spread Greek philosophy throughout the ancient world is kind of the bedrock of all Western civilization. And we refer to Western civilization as the Greco-Roman, based on the Greco-Roman tradition, and that is very true historically and theologically. So it generally views the universe as split in two, so the universe is fundamentally two parts, what is known as metaphysical dualism, or existence in two parts. And the immaterial part is actually the more real. So at a popular level, kind of the immaterial world is less real and the material world is more real. But for ancient Greeks, the immaterial world is more real, and the material world is kind of a broken expression, manifestation of the immaterial world. Does that make sense? So C.S. Lewis was an ardent Platonist. He loved Plato. And so the Great Divorce is a great modern Greek Platonic parable, if you guys know the Great Divorce, in which as people come into the immaterial world, it becomes more real and they can't handle it, so they stay in the outer regions, or hell in his kind of presentation. But that's kind of how they viewed it. So the immaterial world is the world of ideas, which is perfect and isn't corrupt, and those ideas find manifestation or expression in the material world in copies. And I don't think of, I'm not going to work through the kind of specifics on it, because it's a little bit like working through the specifics of Sigmund Freud and his ideas about human consciousness and subconsciousness. Nobody believes in the id, ego, or superego, but everybody believes in a subconscious now. It's just ingrained into modern Western psychology across the world. Plato's the same way. Nobody believes in forms, copies, the intelligible world, the sensible world, and that kind of stuff, but in his language specifically, but they believe in the general structure of the universe that was built, that created in everybody's mind. Does that make sense? And so his parable of the cave is really well known, in which people see light. People are in a cave, they see light on the wall from the fire, and they think that that's reality, and it's actually just a parable that real light is from outside the cave, from the sun, right? And so light in the world is simply a product that's kind of a fake made out of copies from the original form of the ideas in the immaterial world. And so, when he explains the allegory, the prison house is the world of sight. The light of the fire is the sun, and you'll not misapprehend me if you interpret the journey upwards to be the ascent of the soul into the intellectual world. So the general trajectory, the redemptive or salvific trajectory, is from the material world to the immaterial world. That's the goal of history. That's the eschatology of Plato, is to end in the immaterial world. And so as these ideas are spread throughout the Greco-Roman world, and as in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, the majority of followers of this guy, this messianic claimant from Nazareth, become Gentiles. They're heavily influenced by Greco-Roman thought, and that structure of the universe and that general trend of salvation and eschatology moves in that direction. You have particular centers in the 3rd and 4th century of the dispersion of thought within that world, particularly in Alexandria, the catechetical school there, that integrate the Judeo-centric scriptures into that Hellenistic universe. Does that make sense? Origen, Clement and Origen, who were headmasters at the catechetical school, exemplify that. So this is an example of Origen and his commentary on 1 Corinthians 15. So he says, again, Paul says, we shall be caught up in the clouds to meet Christ in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. We are therefore to suppose that the saints will remain there until they recognize the twofold mode of government in those things which are performed in the air. If anyone be pure of heart and holy of mind, and more practiced in perception, he will, by making more rapid progress, quickly ascend to the place in the air and reach the kingdom of heaven. So the kingdom of heaven's the immaterial world, and the goal, or the eschatology, the goal of redemption is to escape the material world in the air and move into the immaterial world. And those who are pure of heart and clear of mind will make that progress faster. Of course, the backside of that is that the people who are not pure of heart and mind are the Jews because they're focused on the material world and they want to, their home is the earth, right? So they're kind of the backside of what Origen is saying is the truth. And so they'll reach the kingdom of heaven through those mansions, so to speak, in the various places which the Greeks have termed spheres, that's globes, but which the Holy Scripture has called heavens. So you get a changing of the heavens mean what the Greeks are talking about, right? So you change the cosmology, you change the playing field, and we're talking about soccer, but it's on a basketball court. But the Jews talk about it in terms of soccer, but we're really playing basketball, right? It's a heavenly end game. It's a immaterial. And so the language of the heavens or the cosmology is changed and to a different cosmological reality. In each of which he will first see clearly what is done there, and in the second place he'll discover the reason why things are done so, and thus he will in order pass through all gradations, following him who has passed into the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, who said, I will that where I am, these may also be. So the end game is not a new heavens and new earth in a glorified Jerusalem and temple, and with the kingdom of God, messianic kingdom on a new earth, but rather the end game is an immaterial heavenly destiny where Jesus went after he was resurrected and ascended. So the different playing field has a different kind of rules of engagement, so to speak. And so I just put a little diagram on the bottom of page 4 there, in which you have the biblical heavens versus the Hellenistic singular heaven. The biblical heavens are plural. They're continuous, meaning there's no clear delineation between the various heavens. They're physical, they're sight, sound, etc., and they're dynamic. There's a relationship. I'm not saying one-to-one, I'm just saying they're dynamic between the heavens and the earth. Even Revelation 8, there's silence for half an hour, there's time. I don't know how all that works out, but whereas the Hellenistic view of heaven is singular, there's material and immaterial, and the singular reality, the intelligible world, is a static reality. Change is viewed as a fundamentally corrupt expression of a static ideal. And even time itself, which we'll get into the next session, time is viewed as a broken expression of timelessness, in which timelessness is the ideal and time is something that should be escaped. So the heavenly view of the structure of the universe, the Hellenistic view is that it's singular, it's discontinuous, you don't go back and forth. So, where Enoch was taken up or Elijah was taken up, or angels come down, the Lord comes down, or in Jewish literature, the saints are, go up and down. That can't happen in a Hellenistic universe between material and immaterial because they're incompatible. The two expressions of reality. That's, I use the analogy of like you burn a piece of wood, it becomes ash and smoke. It doesn't go back to being wood. It doesn't. It's discontinuous. And the Hellenistic view of heaven is non-physical, so there's not a sensibility attached to it, and it's static. It's not dynamic. It doesn't change. And so this kind of cosmology has set the playing field for Western theological tradition in which eschatology is viewed as kind of the eternal sing-along in the clouds, in the heavenly city, heavenly Jerusalem, for on and on. So again, that's just to give a little bit of kind of, I know that session is a little... may seem a little disconnected, but as we move forward, unless you talk about the playing field, then the game, which is Jewish apocalyptic expectations and the narrative associated with that, the game doesn't really make sense because you're constantly, the playing field is off. Does that make sense? All right, amen. Let's take a little break. I'm going to do questions at the end of today and a lot more tomorrow. Today is more just to kind of lay out what is the Jewish apocalyptic narrative of redemptive history, and then we can talk about competing narratives tomorrow, and we'll have more time to do questions after that. Yeah. All right, bless you guys. We'll come back at, say, 3:30-ish.